Welcome back, guys. Today, I want to talk about some lessons I wish I learned when I was in my 20s when it came to business. I want to thank everyone who ever liked, subscribed, or followed our channel before. Today, I specifically want to just point out two things you need to understand that I had to learn, and I learned it through the process. And the first thing is this: when you start a business, you have to, and I mean you have to, at all costs, change the way you view it. If you go work a job right now and you take that position to take a opportunity for employment, here's one of the things you're going to notice. When you get there, they're going to have you fill out all the information for your retirement, for your health insurance. You're going to find these things out. They're going to give you the handbook for the employee because they already established. They have all those things waiting and ready for you. But what about when you start a company for yourself? You're really going through the discovery product. And if you're going through discovery, you might not even do your R&D first. R&D is your research and development. That's important because you need to know if am I actually bringing something to the market that is sustainable, or am I going full in and I really didn't do my due diligence prior to me starting this thing? And if that is the case, you're going to find out, sometimes the hard way, that there are a lot of things that you didn't put in place for yourself. For example, as I talk to different business owners and I talk to different people in the marketplace, you always find out that they say, I've been operating my business for 3 years. In the process of operating their business for 3 years, not once did they take a paycheck. So that meant that when they stopped whatever they were doing before, which was a system that allowed them to pay into Social Security through the job, they worked at the job paid them. Now they actually started their own thing and totally forgot that they have 3 years where they completely disappear, like they don't exist. And because they don't exist, then you have individuals right now that are working in an area which they're operating for themselves. They most likely, depending upon how their company structure, they're in a position that they're not showing any income, so they won't pay any federal, they won't pay any state. And if they do, they're actually in a position where they're saying they took losses so they can actually get money. Almost, again, they're not paying any type of labor costs. They're not doing those items, so they don't exist. Well, at the same time is remember the purpose of a business. The purpose of a business is not actually to pay yourself an income. I know a lot of times people think about that, but we should be saying to ourselves, okay, the purpose of me starting a business is to create wealth. Is to build a company that would allow me to see an absorbent amount of money in the future than I would see if I worked on a job. Most of us have worked on a job. We worked over 5 to 10 years. And then we took on another place of employment because we wanted a raise, because we didn't get one when we was there, or we took another position at a higher place. We didn't, their job opportunity wasn't there. Well, it's not like you own a stake in that company. So 20 years down the road, you're going to get it. We used to have those pensions. If you have a job right now to have a pension, then you know what I mean. You'll have that money coming in. But if you're starting a company and you work somewhere for 5 years and you leave to go somewhere else, we need to make sure that we're on the same page, that a lot of times we only got income while we was there. Yes, your 401k is transferable. Any things that you've done through your financial advisor is transferable. But all the work you did to build that company, you don't have an equity stake in it. So when you start your company, you have to say to yourself, I'm not starting a company just for a paycheck so that I can meet the ends meet. I really need to focus on building wealth. And what do I mean by that? Several businesses right now, due to COVID, are in a position where they're actually, just like people are selling their houses, they're selling their businesses. So there's different situations, but I want to point out one that actually helped me kind of create this video. When I said, if I was in my 20s, I wish I knew this. And that comes down to this. Every year, the company itself has to acquire assets, whether they're products or services. And those assets, as we know, if it's a technology base, then it means most likely the product over time is going to have an expiration, and the value of that expiration because of technology is not going to be worth more tomorrow. So if let's say you're doing a business right now and you're doing home health care, and let's also say you're doing a business, you're doing lawn care. If you're going to sell your business and you are starting right now and you don't know this, you have to build wealth, which means the business has to go out and grow. A lot of businesses right now, they'll be renting for 20 years. They've never went out and started setting money aside. Like, think about it. If you rent for 20 years, then you don't have equity in a house. Well, if you lease for 20 years, you don't have equity in a commercial building that you can actually build. And, there are so many type of buildings you can build right now that are they don't have to be $1 million business building. It could be almost like a 3-unit building or a 3Q building or what you want to call. But if you do it, we're talking about a Class C building, most likely a Class D. But you can actually build a building where you can have a stall where you can lease that space out. So that way, when you no longer operate your business, you're getting lease income from commercial real estate. Well, there's several businesses that lease for 20 years, and they lease as if they rented for 20 years, and there's no equity in that building because they don't own it. They paid someone else. So 20 years ago, people didn't have that conversation. Like, don't forget, you're starting your business, and right now you have to lease it. We get that. Well, your next step is to go from leasing to owning a building where you're leasing out and have your business ran out of it. That's going to be your goal. How come? Because when it's time for you to retire, you can sell your business, but still get income coming in from your commercial leases. Now, that's important to know because you think about it. Most of us are starting businesses. If you haven't, when I first started, my motivation was wealth for myself so I can get more items. Maybe that was the reason you started your business as well. You say, I want to do something where I can be paid more. I can work on my own time. Maybe that's the reason you came to this conclusion. And if you did, just keep this in mind. Eventually, you have to move from leasing a space to owning spaces where your business operate out of it, and you also receiving lease income from it. Because it will come down to a point as a business owner, remember, your business now is your retirement. And it shouldn't be that I have to sell my business and get a lump sum of money and it stops growing. Wealth should be a continual step up. That even after I pass away, then it's still growing. That generations, my grandkids are still reaping the benefits. They may not want to do the service part of the business or the product part of the business, but they'll hold the real estate. They can go get a management group to actually manage the real estate, and they can get paid once a year or every quarter from the real estate, a paycheck from sitting on it. We need to think about that as entrepreneurs or as business owners. If you're building a company and you have officers and directors in your company, at the end of the day, you spent time building that. 20 years. So the only thing that you have outside of it is trying to sell your customer base, and you don't own the building. You may have vehicles, but those vehicles are going to be depreciating assets that over time. And if those vehicles are 6, 7 years old, they really don't have any monetary value, just to be very clear. These are the things, like I said, when I was 20, I didn't think about. And here's another thing. Wealth also means you keep money. There are so many accountants out there that you can come in contact with. I even had one at one point that was actually telling me I need to make sure I don't have any retained earnings. You need to make sure so you don't have to pay taxes. Well, depends on what type of legal entity your lawyer or your accountant structures for you. In my case, I operate any businesses that I have with, in general, I operate from a C corp. Some of you may operate from an LLC. So it's terrifying to have money retained. Well, that's what wealth is. It's money that's retained. So you can actually see sometimes that when you're building a company and you choose a certain entity that you should really talk to a lawyer or an accountant about, they can tell you that, yes, I was talking to a person earlier, one of the CEOs from Nexus Capital, and I was talking to Brian, and when he stopped past the office, one of the things we talked about was, okay, most accountants think you're not going to make money. That's their belief. So they'll tell you to start an LLC because it'll be a couple of years before you make profit. But what if we did this? What if we did this? This is just an example to kind of give you to say that you can make profit. What if I started a business and I put $5,000 in my bank account? In the process of putting $5,000 in my business bank account, I only set it in the money market. And for a whole year, I did R&D, but didn't touch that $5,000. In the accountant's mind, the first couple of years, you're not going to make any money. But if I sat it in the money market in my business bank account and I didn't do anything else, at the end of the year, they're going to send me a statement that I made interest. I made profit. Isn't that what my accountant told me the first 5 years I wouldn't do? Well, it's not true. The first year I made profit. Well, if I had an LLC and they told me that I need to go into that and that was it, then I would have to, because that $5,000 sitting in the bank and it generated profit, let's just assume it generated $300. I'm now subject to pay the taxes on the $300. And underneath for a single member LLC, which my accountant or my lawyer would tell me, that falls on my personal taxes. Wait, time out. No one told me that. So I need to take this $300 that I got in interest from not allocating my funds inappropriately. I let it sit there as I did R&D to make sure that whatever I was going to do, product or service, there was enough people who were going to pay me without me touching my $5,000 that's generating interest. Because once I allocated that $5,000, I'm not getting that money back if I misappropriate it. It's gone. I have to put labor to it in order to get that back. And if my labor is inconsistent with the reality of what I'm trying to offer, then that's going to take longer. But keeping that in mind, and I'm putting myself in a situation that now I have to show in a K1 I made $300, And he would say, well, go out and get a laptop, go out and pay this. So I don't make $3,000 because the initial application that I take from and here's the thing most people don't realize this. If I have $5,000 in my business, in my personal bank account, and my accountant tells me to start an LLC, that's considered a capital contribution. That 5,000 capital contribution is negative in my personal bank account and positive in my business bank account. So if I'm going to have an LLC, I actually will get a K1 say, I actually have a capital contribution of 5K and I'm down $5,000. On my personal taxes, if I make any other money, let's say I make $10,000, I can claim against that 5 in 1 year or over 5 years or over 7 max. And I can claim that money. And if I claim that money, automatically, if I make 10, and let's assume I'm talking about the 5,000 and I do it over 5 years, I only make $9,000. However, if that $5,000 in the business bank account makes 3, that moves my income up to now I can't claim that. I have to now say I only lost 7 because I made $300. So it's not the concept that you can't make money. It's actually making a decision. So when you make money, what's the strategy? But if the strategy is I can't keep the 300, then automatically, if I do this over a course of 5 years, this is one of the lessons I would tell you. You will get into a position where you get used to not actually building a company, just building income for yourself. And that is the warning that I want to give everybody today. In this short conversation is don't build income from yourself at all. Get yourself an advisory board. If your accountants are not as consistent and they are not familiar with it, and they can't help you understand that you are trying to build, if all you're doing is generating money, so that at the end of the year, you can show that you spent the money, because sometimes you'll end up with 3 or 4 cars. And that's because you're making money for your business and you don't want to pay the IRS taxes. At the same time, you don't want to pay those taxes. You're actually acquiring things that don't have value. And that's the opposite of the purpose of a business, is to accumulate wealth that's increasing each year as you're in it, with at the same time retaining earnings. That's the key. If we put it in another notion, we can look at it this way. I'm going to purposely start a company where I keep 10% of every dollar I ever make. So that meant that if I make $1,000, I'm keeping $100. Automatically at the end of the year, your accountant going to say, well, you have to pay taxes on the $100. That's going to be a statement they're going to tell you. Well, if it's an LLC, yes. If it's a C corporation, your accountant or your lawyer would tell you something different. You'll be surprised what they say. I can tell you what mine told me. Well, you have a capital contribution. You have this $100 that's left over, and the corporation didn't make a profit this year because of the amount of money put into it versus the amount of the expenses that came out. Even though you made $100 in profit and you took money from your personal checking into your business to start this, there's not a taxable event that you're going to have it this year, period. But they don't tell you that. If I was an LLC, that $100 I have to pay taxes on it. If I'm a C corp, I'm not. So as you're growing as an entrepreneur, you will have to trade up on your advisory board, because remember, accountants and lawyers are actually outside advisors that do a certain task. They do not participate. And I tell people this all the time. If your accountant was in wealth creation and they were generating wealth, you will come the following year and there'll be a sign on the door and say this: I no longer do accounting, I'm wealthy, find somebody else to do it. Think about it. Accountant actually does the paperwork for a $10 million company, and they make $200,000 a year, and they don't quit doing what they're doing, and they see everything this person making $10 million or $50 million is doing, and they still an accountant. I don't know about you, but there's no way I still be an accountant, because they just gave me the blueprint to make $10 million, and I'm only charging him, let's say, $6,000 for the whole year for whatever it is. If that's the case, I don't know if the CPA or his accountant may charge him. But if he's still doing that job after 10 years and he can only brag about having a $50 million client, you need to leave that accountant, because he's not going to sit here and says, he's not going to tell you, hey, listen, these are certain things that I've noticed that one of my clients that I can't mention because it's private and I have an agreement, I can't disclose that. But these things you need to implement, and I need you to pay more because I'm going to tell you what you need to implement so that you can get up to be 10 million. I don't know of any accountants right now that's telling those secrets unless you're telling them do my taxes because I know the secret, and they'll just do it. They'll find it. I've sat down with over my lifetime, 100 accountants at different times and points in my life, over 100. And in the process, sitting down with them, interviewing them, having a conversation, you know what I found out? They still accountants. I can look back, they still accountants. Very rarely do they ever become the entrepreneur that's generating the 50. Because if that's the case, they're going to go from an office of having, let's say, 5 to 10 people to 100 to 1,000 to a big CPA firm. And most of them will tell you, I'm not trying to get that big. Well, if they're not trying to get that big, that means there's skills they have to get that big. And there's more employees, and they also know the strategies. Remember, the accountant's supposed to be very familiar, CPA is supposed to be very familiar with the laws that the IRS puts out there that gives you the advantage to keep your money, not to spend the money, but to keep it. Businesses are here to stimulate the economy, to create jobs. And you can't create it if all you're doing is getting a check for yourself. So keep that in mind today. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. And I have more tips for you coming the rest of this week. You guys have a great day.